Yo, what's up, guys? The original Gotei 13 were revealed a few weeks ago, and while this is pretty late, I will be reviewing the new captain designs and providing my thoughts and theories relating to them. These mysterious figures have been hyped up since their original appearance around 10 years ago, if I'm not mistaken, to be the strongest, most brutal iteration of the Gotei 13, and as of late, we have not only been able to put faces and names to the silhouettes that tease their existence, we have officially, albeit briefly, seen them in action in the anime itself. So, in this video, I'm going to be going over all of the first Gotei 13 captains, their names, the squads they led, which design is my favorite, and generally talk about them. I'm very excited to hop into this video topic, so let's start off quickly with the boring stuff, Yamamoto. There isn't much to say about Old Father Christmas that hasn't been said already, but I will note that the flashbacks of him within the anime really stress how terrible and brutal of a man he was in his past, and during the fight with Roy Lloyd, we saw hints of his old sadistic self shining through, and that's actually a topic that I want to cover in the future, just how morally gray of a person Yamamoto turned out to be within the story, despite being the head of the Gotei 13. But enough about him. All right, next up, we're going to be talking about the captain of the second division, Chika Shihoin, obviously a direct ancestor of the goddess herself, Yoruichi. Now, I'm not going to hold you. From this image, I 100% thought Chika was a girl. I remember seeing people refer to him as a dude when the image first dropped, and I was like, you idiots, it's obviously a woman. And then we saw him in the anime, and I saw homie was like 7 foot tall with pecs, and I felt really stupid. So I will hold that L. Not to say that there aren't women that are 7 foot tall with pecs, but I'm in very dangerous territory. So let me just refocus. Chika, really cool design. I think the earrings, which are typically more of a fashion statement in our society, aesthetically pair really well with his brutal trademark Shihoan hand-to-hand combat style. And based on his smirk, the posture, and the clothing he wears, he just seems to ooze a bit of charisma, and I really enjoy that. So let's go to the next guy. Next up, the captain of the third division is Kenroku Izuhara. And I enjoy that despite being the strongest, most brutal iteration of the Gotei 13, I like how not everyone here looks as overtly unhinged as, say, some of the other members that we will be discussing later on. This guy looks like the quiet sociopath doctor type, and looking at how he seemed to kill by slicing necks, I'm sure there's a lot of credibility to that assessment. So let's go on to the next one. The captain of Squad 4 is Chigiri Shijima. And I'm pretty sure this was a captain that caught a lot of people's eye as well. And it makes sense with the long hair and the quiet loner vibe that he's got going on. He's definitely an enticing captain. I'm not trying to judge those in the bleach healing profession or anything, but he doesn't necessarily look like the caring and gentle type. I could be wrong, but it's possible that at this point, the Gotei 13 didn't have a division that was focused on healing. And that's just more of a spitball factoring in how turbulent and violent this time was in the Gotei 13's history. Although from a practical standpoint, it's possible there was still the healing division and that it was still Squad 4. Unfortunately, as with many things, we will have to see, but still, good character design. All right, next up at number 5 is Danjiro Obana, who many have compared to the Shiba clan members, and for good reasons. He has some pretty visible similarities with a few of the characters, and as many have pointed out, the hilt of his zanpakuto seems to have sort of a flame emblem, which shares some similarity to the emblem on Kukaku Shiba's clothing. The Shiba clan seem to specialize in fireworks and fire-based abilities. Kukaku Shiba with her fireworks. I'm pretty sure Ganju uses some type of fireworks, and Ishin himself has a flame-based zanpakuto. While there aren't many Shiba clan members left in Bleach, I don't think it's a reach to say that there's a theme of fireworks and fire throughout the clan that seems to be intentional that you can possibly extend to Danjiro. On a slightly unrelated note, I'm not a Japanese expert or anything, and I could be wrong, but a quick Google search led me to find out that the word Shiba in Japanese seems to mean brushwood or firewood, which, as the name implies, is wood that's commonly used to start fires, which is also related to why the dog, the Shiba Inu, has its name. I don't know. Maybe you guys knew that. I didn't. But that was just an interesting thing that I found out when I was researching. Anyway, between the visual and emblem similarities, it's not crazy to say that we have found an ancestor of Ichigo Kurosaki himself, with the limited information we have. The captain of Squad 6 is probably already the fan favorite of the bunch, Furofushi Saito. The fan art speaks for itself, gentlemen. This captain has struck a chord with the community, and you know what? Fair enough. I enjoy the design, and she looks absolutely insane. I've also heard some theories that she may be related to Shunsui. She looks very similar to a Zanpakuto spirit, Captain Kyokutsu, and she also has an eye patch, so some theorize that there's some sort of connection there. Initially, I was very against the idea just because I didn't want every captain to have a direct on-the-nose family relationship to someone in the original Gotei 13, but I might be able to let it slide if executed correctly, which, if it's the case, I'm sure it will be. But on a side note, I think Kubo did really well by letting these guys stand on their own. So I'm excited to see more of her, but I'm a bit more on the fence than a lot of people are. So we'll have to see. Apparently, her name can also be loosely translated to immortality. I'm extremely unsure of what to make of that. Considering she doesn't appear in the original story, I'm going to take a gamble that by that time she is deceased and that her name, implying that she is immortal, isn't literal. Almost every time we see immortality in anime in general, it's almost never actual immortality. So, I'm a little bit skeptical about any implications from that, but it's probably something we should keep in the back of our minds. Next up, we have another popular design in Nobutsuna Shigeo, captain of the 7th Division. He's front and center in the original image and has this really grizzled, emaciated, murderous look that I think best encapsulates the idea that the original Gotei 13 were a band of killers. If I were to imagine Kenpachi's father, this would probably be the first thing to pop into mind. Now, first, I'll discuss some theories about this guy that are going on in the community, and then I'll drop my own personal one. Starting off, considering he leads the 7th Division and has a bloodthirsty, almost animalistic look, some have theorized that similar to Komamura, he has some sort of animal transformation-based ability and or is an ancestor of Komamura himself. It's a cool thought, but if you consider that Komamura was essentially a wanderer before he became a captain, and to my knowledge had no affiliation with the Gotei 13 before, I could be wrong on that, but that's my assumption. It would be kind of strange for his ancestor to lead the 7th Division and then have this huge gap that leads to Komamura being born outside of the Gotei 13 and then randomly being found and integrated back into the Gotei 13 conveniently in the 7th Division. Plus, if this is like a lineage thing, I'm not sure if there would have been as much stigma around Komamura's appearance in the first place, since it would have been normal to see 7th Division captains have transformation abilities. But it's possible, and it is a really cool idea. Others have pointed to his wrists, and as you can see, there are these dark burn-like wounds. Based on the fact that they appear on his hands, I saw someone theorize that his Zanpakuto was some sort of poison-based weapon that affects him, and that's a pretty cool theory. And to expand on that, not only could it lead to the wounds on his hands, it could also explain his overall unhealthy appearance. Now, on to my thoughts and theories. From what I've observed, I think it's very interesting that he seems to wear something on his head similar to a Russian ushanka or a Russian fur hat, which is typically used to protect against cold weather. You can kind of make out the flaps on the sides of his head that cover the ears, and of course he has the extended fur on the top of his head, which pushes his hair up. The Russian fur hat looking thing plus the scarf could either support the idea that he's related to Komamura's clan, or it could support my own personal theory. Now, this might sound a bit wild and fanficky, but we know Komamura is a wolf, and his ancestors were as well, at least up to an extent. And we also know that some wolves tend to be located in cold climates. Shigeo also looks like he comes from a cold climate with his fur clothing and pale skin, but my idea is that instead of them being related, what if Shigeo comes from a clan that hunts Komamura's kind and or has a blood feud with them, explaining where he's gotten the fur from? On a side note, the fur around his neck seems to be a similar color to Komamura, which is an even bigger stretch, but, yeah. It would be kind of weird for a member of a clan that can turn into an animal to keep an animal-based scarf around his neck. It seems kind of insulting unless it's some sort of memorial, which, to be fair, is pretty cool too. Anyway, I know the whole idea is fan fiction-y, like I said, but it's cool in my opinion. The idea of two clans engaged in a blood war fits the hectic climate of the early days, and it's possible that due to conflict, they both drove each other to near extinction and they split ways. Yes, obviously this has a lot of holes in it, possibly more than the idea that Komamura is related to this guy directly, but it's interesting to think about in my opinion. Now, everyone's talking about Furofushi and all that, cool, but this is more up my alley. Batsu Unsai Katori, the librarian as I call her, is the captain of Squad 8. Many people have assumed that she was a member of the Issei family due to the visual similarities, but very interestingly, I saw a couple posts that put forth the idea that she is a Kuchiki ancestor due to the fact that she has gray eyes, and a lot of other Kuchikis seem to as well. I admit not the best evidence, sure, but I do like the idea of the original family head being this unassuming, well equipped girl with her with her oh god, with her pole thing, right? It kind of subverts the expectation of where you'd imagine that the Kuchiki clan would start. But considering we're operating off eye color, I wouldn't put all my eggs in the basket that she is a Kuchiki ancestor. She seems to wield a Guandao, Naginata, or some type of weapon like that, which was really off putting. Seeing this short, shy, wholesome woman cutting people in half, it unlocked some things within me that I think were better closed off, but what is done cannot be undone. Funny side note, I saw that when her design dropped on Reddit, this guy referred to her as his bespeckled beauty, and that was super funny, so shout out to that random Redditor. For now, the mysterious milk, the mysterious mommy, the mysterious maiden, maiden will have to remain a mystery. Next is Kamui Entetsu, captain of Squad 9. This guy is actually kind of interesting. Similar to Izuhara, the captain before, who seemed like the quiet sociopath, doctor-looking mofo. This guy is on the other side of the same coin. With the small round glasses, the scar above his eye, the mouthpiece he seems to have on, all in all, he just looks like a mad doctor type of character, which is really interesting when paired with his large physique and zanpakuto, which seems to be a spine-shaped club. Typically, scientist types like Mayuri, Uruhara, and even Aizen typically aren't that physically imposing, so to switch that up is nice. Not that it hasn't been done before with Hyosu, but obviously this guy seems to be more built for combat. Um, Not saying he is a mad scientist or anything, just saying he kind of gives off that vibe with his appearance, and that contrasted with his bulky appearance and blunt weapon is pretty cool. Aside from being the first character in Bleach to feature a grill, which is pretty cool, dude's iced out. I don't have much to say. All right, the first captain of Squad 10 was Furuoki Otogawa. And with his physical appearance and headpiece, the assumption that he was a Kuchiki ancestor isn't that crazy. He looks pretty glum and indifferent, similar to Byakuya, and is one of the few captains here that looks out of place in terms of his lack of raw intimidation. He does seem like the higher class noble type, and it's really interesting to see him and a couple of other captains that don't look, as physically intimidating by Bleach standards, sprinkled into the original Gotei 13. It balances more out there designs with more basic ones, and I'm always a fan of that kind of thing. So interested to see where this guy goes. Next up, we have a youthful Unohana, of course, as the captain of Squad 11, and I really like the pale, eerie, ghostly appearance. Unohana is one of my favorite characters in Bleach, and seeing her during her days as the first Kenpachi alongside the rest of the Gotei 13 is a really exciting thing. I want to make a video covering her sometime soon, so stay tuned. And on a side note, it must be really nice for people who have been watching Bleach and or reading the Bleach manga ever since it came out to finally have a face put to all of these, mysterious figures and stuff like that, and finally be able to see, these people who have been hyped up for over 10 years. Just a side note, but yeah, let's continue. All right, next up we have the captain of Squad 12, Uhin Zenjoji. This guy is very, very big. He looks wild in almost every conceivable aspect. And it's really cool to, once again, I know I've said this a couple times, but finally put a face and name to one of the most eye-catching designs from the original silhouettes, at least for me. Back when the original silhouettes, were the only source we had on these guys, you see this really big guy with like these wild braids and large frame, and it really screamed, I'm an unhinged maniac. So I'm glad we got to stick the landing with the rest of the design. Some people correctly assume that he was the captain of Squad 12 even before his name and squad dropped, and I was really against it due to the face paint similarity that he shares with Mayuri. I've always seen that as a Mayuri thing, so knowing that the first captain of the 12th Division also painted his face is kind of strange, especially if there's no connection between the two, which I feel like is likely, but who knows. Regardless, similar to most of the other squads, I'm not sure if at this time, if the 12th Division even focused on research and development, so it's hard to say if he was a man of science. But if he is, the fact that he seems to be a messy brawler type is really interesting. Just crushing heads together and stuff like that. It's very, very, very classy. And finally, we have Squad 13's Saizo Sakahone. I don't like to judge, man. I really don't. But this guy is old as like ancient, bro. This guy aged terribly. Despite that, he is a captain, which makes me extremely suspicious. We've seen old characters that are very powerful before, but never in this fashion, and never physically this old. Yamamoto is the strongest, yet physically and visually oldest fighter that we have probably seen, yet he still managed to maintain a good physique and posture, but this guy's extremely hunched, bony, and generally seems to be knocking on death's door. Despite this, he, as I mentioned, along with the other captains on this list, is a part of the strongest iteration of the Gotei 13. And while that doesn't automatically mean that he's stronger than any other current captains or is necessarily strong in general, I imagine he has a catch to him. In the anime itself, where the old Gotei 13 confront the Quincy, he is seen moving amongst the battlefield, seemingly taking out any survivors he finds quietly, which is suiting of his decrepit appearance, but very strange if you consider how violent the old Gotei was and how high the standards would have been, presumably, to join. I highly doubt this guy joined the Gotei 13 saying, hey, yo, I'm old as L and can't fight, but I can I don't know, I could stab defeating enemies for you guys or something. And Yamamoto was just like, bro, that's based. You're one of us now. He has to have something to his character. I don't know. Maybe he utilizes keto poison or something that doesn't require that much physical effort, um, uh, or something. Or maybe he just has a lot of destructive physical capabilities, which would throw me for a loop. I don't know. He in his art, he's standing on one foot. I don't know what that means. He haunts my dreams, and that's about it. Um, just get me away from this guy. Well, guys, that's it for the original Gotei 13. Honestly, I'm really satisfied with what I've been seeing for the most part, and it just goes to show how consistent Kubo is, even after all these years. He still manages to pump out engaging character designs that capture the love and admiration of the fans. I mean, just look at the community reaction to Furofushi. They're very invested in her. Personally, my favorite design is Chika Shihoin. Like I said, with his posture and demeanor, he seems really smooth and confident. And if I'm correct, those are traits that he clearly passed down to Yoruichi. On a side note, it's possible he's one of the more physically stronger captains due to his preference for hand-to-hand combat, which would be another enticing element to his character. One thing I'm sure you guys have noticed is that I'm really fixated on the strength of this group. Shunsui had mentioned that they were the strongest Gotei 13 iteration, implying a pretty big gap between the original Gotei and the Gotei 13 that we were first introduced to. And of course, the Stern Ritter Roy Lloyd, who was copying Yuha's memories and appearance, also confirms this, referring to the old Gotei 13 as a band of killers. I hold these guys in very high regard in terms of power, and yes, that's not based on much, but looking at the statements we have, I like to think that the majority of captains that we're seeing here are much stronger than the captains we have grown to know and love over the years, and that's a really nice dynamic. Like it or not, the captains we're used to are built more for peace, and these guys are not. So looking at this image, knowing that some of our favorite captains could potentially be far outclassed is a nice reflective moment. If you think of the struggles that the captains have faced throughout the story of Bleach and follow their power progression, you feel a sense of pride. But now that's coming to a head with this old Gotei 13, who are a genuine cast of warriors and killers. Essentially, I feel like the Gotei 13 we have grown to love are like children to this older generation, and that's not bad. It adds a super cool component to the story where it's like, if these two organizations clash at some point in the future, how will people born during times of peace and complacency learn to stack up? That's already being tested right now in the Thousand Year Blood War arc, and I feel like it could potentially be taken to new heights with these guys. That's all assuming that at some point in the distant future, these guys pop up in the anime or manga again as antagonists, which I feel like is being hinted at with all these, drops and, releasing the characters and stuff like that. But who knows? Maybe these guys are just one-off characters, but I doubt it. Alright guys, that concludes the video. If you've enjoyed and want to see more content from me, consider liking and all that good stuff. If not, still hope you guys enjoyed. I am Sentiment, really liking the OG Gotei 13, and I suppose that is my cue.